Hello and welcome to Bloke on the Range, and I'm joined here by Tom, otherwise known as Canadian Multigun. So, would you like to introduce yourself to those who have not come across you yet?
Yeah, so I'm Tom, the owner and operator of Canadian Multigun, and I conduct two gun action challenge matches within British Columbia in Canada, and we're looking to expand across Canada. We've got a series of events, and I'm looking forward to talking about some of them and some of the Canadian shooting culture and some non-restricted rifles.
Yeah, so the aim of this video is to be a bit of a too long didn't read, but it's going to be quite long because there's lots of ground to cover, not going into too much of the gory detail. But Canada is not exactly a gun ownership or gun usage paradise, and there's some very funny things around the restricted and non-restricted stuff. And I'm quite interested to find out how in that environment and with the sorts of firearms that are available to you there in Canada, how you actually run two-gun brutality type matches up there. So what I think we can do, Tom has made a beautiful death by PowerPoint. So I think we'll let him take the reins and poke him with questions at certain junctures. So crack on.
Thank you. All right, so as I've alluded to, we conduct two gun action challenge matches, otherwise known as brutality events, and we're currently doing it from various ranges in British Columbia, which for those of you that don't know is in Western Canada. We're looking to move to Ontario due to demand, and we predominantly conduct three core events, which is winter, summer, and night brutality. I'm sure many of the people who watch this channel are quite familiar with Two Gun Action Challenge or brutality events, having seen your videos from attending Finished, Brutality, and others. And so I won't talk about that so much. For those of you that don't know what these events are, they are effectively challenging shooters to, while under physical and mental stress, engage different targets at different ranges from different positions as quickly as possible. I think that's a fair summary.
Yeah, that's pretty good.
So what I'm going to do is talk a little bit about our specific events and some of the things that might make them a little bit different from other brutality events. So to start off with, we don't just do individual shooting stages. We also have group stages. So, for example, uh, casualty evacuation. A squad of 10 might have to carry two 80-kilo stretchers, 600 meters, smash it back to the firing line, dress behind the gats, and then make hits out to 400 meters under time pressure. You're still being scored on an individual basis because you've got a fixed time to do it, but the number of hits you make is there and you're still being challenged. Others, rifle only divisions. So we have the handgun freeze here, which I'll go into a bit more detail later, but basically it's now illegal to acquire a new handgun if you don't have, full stop. If you've got 20 and your friend's got one, that's what you've got. So we started to bring in rifle only divisions to try and keep people coming into the sport as we, fingers crossed, go through the years it takes before it's revealed. And non-shooting stages. So in part pushed on through facility limitations, but then through success effectively. We started conducting stages that don't actually involve shooting. And I'm going to give a couple of examples of those too, but they're just a lot of fun. And focusing on removing barriers. So it can be expensive to get into different disciplines. We get that. And so we try to make all of the events enjoyable with your basic SKS. It's 300 euros surplus and some surplus pouches. You come along, you work hard, just as hard as at any other event, but you're able to enjoy yourself. You won't win, but you'll enjoy yourself.
Yeah, I
And
mean,
a
it's a general
yeah,
principle that, I mean, okay, outside of Canada, that stages should be completable at least with a stock AK. And a good
yeah,
SKS is generally out shooting a good AK in 7.62 by 39, but the SKS has a longer sight radius and actually gives a much better sight picture as a result. But I was in Canada a few weeks back, and in a gun shop, Chinesium SKS on the wall.
mhm,
It's kind of the default non-restricted semi-auto in Canada, is it not?
Yes. Yeah, definitely. And the other factor that pushes us towards the SKS is magazine capacity limits. So I won't go into much detail, but the long story short is that in the most affordable caliber in Canada, 7.62 by 39, the vast majority of magazines are limited to 5 rounds. You can get some 10 rounders, and you can get plenty of 10 round 5.56 by 45 mags. But again, we're just setting baseline as with other events. And Canada has a really weird position of what's available legally and what's not. So, yeah, Norinco everything, often available. Perfectly good European stuff, often not available. It's weird.
Yeah, because you can flex on the Americans with the Chinesium stuff because there's no embargo.
Yeah, exactly. So Norinco Type 81, Type 97, crack on. AR-15, nope. It's weird, but we'll cover that. Rifles at rifle distance. I'm a big believer in shooting rifles at 2, 3, 400 meters with intermediate calibers. Um, I enjoy shooting rifles at short distances, but I just don't see a great deal of value in at 20 meters. And I've seen at our events numerous people who have trained for that having bad days. And I don't want anyone to have a bad day, but it is satisfying to see people learning and having their training and capabilities balanced. All right. So first and foremost, winter brutality. Those of you who have seen some of the Finnish brutality events, some have been more based in winter than others. We'll see that the predominant challenge of this event, on top of the actual stages themselves, is the environment. Where we have previously conducted winter brutality, it has been in 2 meters of snow and up to minus 25 degrees centigrade or minus 13 for our imperial friends. And that separates the men from the boys. It really does. You start to see a lot more failures in equipment. You start to see why you can pay $1,000 and $5,000 for two seemingly equally capable semi-autos, then the metallurgy and the quality of the synthetics used in the cheaper rifle, we start to see a lot more breakages, a lot more piston snapping, and various other things.
And you got the simple issue of lubes that work in temperate conditions just eat a big bag of fat ones at that kind of temperature.
Exactly. So, like other brutality events, we are very much focused on full power ammunition, no IPSC bunny farts. And we have seen race guns come and just utterly collapse. People have said their lubricant is specifically for this temperature range. And then they bring it and it's -1, even on like a regular October day, and then it just collapses. So, the event as a whole is fantastic for challenging people and their gear. And as promised, I'll talk a little bit about what might make it different. So, I alluded to this earlier, the casualty evacuation. This is one of our group stages. Our squads are typically 10 people strong, and after a gentle warm up, I immediately smash them into picking up 2 80-kilo stretchers, do a 600-meter looped run through snow, mercilessly berating them along the way. And it's always 2 stretchers. So, first stretcher that gets back, those people have got a choice. They can do press ups until the second group reaches them, or they can go back and help the second group. Most of them choose to go back to the second group. They come back absolutely blowing out their asses, and then they've got 2 to 3 minutes, depending on how nice I'm feeling, to engage with pistol, 10 rounds, targets at 25 and 50 meters, rifle, targets at 1, 2, 3, and 400 meters, 10 rounds apiece. And scoring, it's a fixed time period. Scoring is based on how many hits you get on each target. And that is a mega stage because everyone pulls together on that one. Everyone walks away having done something as a whole squad. And I find it unifies everyone. You know how it is. You're fighting the event, not each other.
Yeah, that's one of the nice things about these kinds of matches. That's the camaraderie. It's not, nobody's trying to trip someone else up into DQing, like the old IPSC idiot thing of like cocking people's hammers in their holsters and that sort of utter nonsense. Everyone wants everyone else to do as best they can because it's you against the match, you against the stage.
Very strong words for anyone who touched anyone else's firearm without their permission.
Oh yes,
Very strong words. Yeah, so it's great. One of our non-shooting stages, sometimes we'll have a bayonet and gas mask stage.
Nice.
We'll finish whatever you are, whatever stage you're on, you finish your stage, dress off, drop your gats off, pull your gas mask on, pick up a proven clear rifle with bayonet, and you'll go through 200-300 meters of woodland, engaging any and all mannequins along the way. And that is just absolutely champion. People often, I think, don't know how hard it is to work with a gas mask on. I think everything's easily 3 times harder, I'd say. And it's wonderful seeing a combination of war cries and vomiting.
I did British Army style rundown. You're only running 100 meters, but just having that face hugger on your face, and you can breathe out fine because you broke the seal, but then you breathe in, and you got to breathe in through the canister.
Yeah,
was a shocker.
It's absolute pain, and obviously we make sure there's a canister. If you try and get sneaky and take it off, you're gonna have a bad day. Yeah. We try to get each squad to volunteer. To vote on who did the best from their squad, and then we'll take each person from the squad, and we'll have a press up or some other challenge to whoever does the most in 2 minutes gets to keep the SKS or whatever we've used on that occasion. And that brings out a competitive side, that's for sure.
Nice.
So that's just a whole whale of fun, and you can see we've taped up the gun there nice and visibly, and it's got a trigger lock on it just because you never know where pitches are going to be used, and we always make sure our event pitches are available for everyone. So we like to keep it nice and clear. And so our next, Winter Brutality is our whole next event as a whole is March 1st and 2nd. So if you do want to get involved in, running through a series of fantastic stages and these sorts of bonus activities, that's the next one that we'll be doing. The next beast is Summer Brutality, and this is a completely different kettle of fish from Winter Brutality. It can be an absolute larpathon if you want it to be. And the reason for that is we have the light infantry division, and as I'm sure many people are familiar with the armored divisions of various brutality events, we've got a list of equipment that you need to bring with you. We take this up another notch by effectively making it making a light infantry list of equipment. I'm former light infantry, and so I like this sort of thing. And these guys will come on the Friday, and they will go out Friday night with a team of current and former military. Go out, they'll set up a harbour area, or patrol hide, as the Canadians call it, I think. And they will be patrolling. They'll go through a nighttime patrol, conduct nighttime navigation lessons and various other sort of night equipment lessons. They'll have been briefed in advance that the enemy is present, and it's up to them how they choose to guard their harbour area. In the morning, they do a multi-kilometer hike back to the range, and then they get straight into the stages. This has been one of my personal favorite things because the competitors have now started actively fighting's not the right word, but struggling with the staff, because the first time we did it, myself and a few others went into the harbour area without noticing. We took some of their guns, and then we woke them up with a delightful series of bear bangers and smoke grenades, immediate stand to, and then smashed them into the bug out.
That's an absolute classic one. How do they fall for that? You gotta have your cat in your sleeping bag, isn't it?
It's Honestly, it was a mix of hilarious because it's fun waking people up with explosives, and deplorable watching how slow people were to, put away their flip-flops or whatever. Uh,
Yeah.
but the thing I really like about it is that competitors have now started actively resisting us, and that's taken the form of some very well organized stag duty or patrol duty. And they've started setting up booby traps with airsoft grenades and flashbangs.
Oh,
So that
cool.
one competitor, he put it, I think it was a flashbang, underneath his rifle so that if we picked it up, it would go off. I I really like that. That when I
That's
found out
creative.
about that, it made me so happy. Yeah, we
That's
are.
very
I think
creative.
that. Yeah, I mean, this is probably one of the few shooting competitions where the staff and competitors are actively in a struggle against one another.
I like the sound of
Uh,
this.
yeah, and it's good. It's all good fun. We also do an obstacle course for the entirety of the event. So this isn't just for light infantry. We have a fantastic company who comes and helps us, MLK Elite. They build an obstacle course, and we run all the competitors through it in pairs and then as a squad. And I'm a big believer that physical confidence brings mental confidence. Um, and for a lot of people, just the same with going over a wall or a lot of brutality stages. I think when was the last time you climbed a rope? For a lot of people, they were 16, and that was it. And so it's really cool being able to get people through rope bridges, climbing things and so on. And they're being instructed by a professional, and then they're getting to go through the whole thing under time. And again, it's just another sort of, uh, it's a non-shooting stage, but it's a lot of fun, and a lot of guys who come to these sort of events, it's exactly the sort of thing they do. Human concealment. So um, again, non-shooting stage, we gave each squad a lesson on why things are seen. The six S's,
How
shadow,
not to
silhouette,
be
and so
seen, Monty
forth.
Python style.
Yes. Uh, they get to implement those lessons, and there's a big wooded and sort of prairie and various other thing area. We'll stick a flag in the middle. The squad individually has to reach it, and without being shot by staff members who are hunting them with airsoft guns. And maybe should have worded that differently. If they get to the flag, they get a prize. And
Nice.
you know how it is. It's a kids' game turned with adults, and everyone has a great time. It gets taken very seriously. Ghillie suits turning up. We've had yeah yeah. Some people take it very seriously, and it's fantastic. Other people, it's hilarious because you can see that they've still got their cat's ears on, and you can literally see them bobbing up and down from the tree line or whatever. uh, Again, huge amount of fun, great for everyone to get out and have a good time with. And again, it's a way to actually use your gear. Like a lot of people, we go to the range, you might have webbing or whatever on, but when was the last time you crawled 100 meters? So there is actually a valuable purpose to it as well. Stop the bleed.
Okay.
So Offspec War, one of our sponsors, comes and enables this, and it's twofold for me. First is as much as I love shooting, its utility outside of the range for a lot of us is not that big, and so I try at the events I run to enable people to take lessons and skills away from them that they can apply elsewhere in life and are still of interest to them. You're not going to get a Microsoft spreadsheet lesson. Uh, Here we'll take, we'll run a full lesson on the application of tourniquets, stiff, putting, packing wounds and so forth, and also the identification of counterfeit tourniquets and other equipment, which are sadly very prevalent at ranges and other places. And so Dan, who runs Offspec War, runs this, and he's a great bloke. He'll run them through the lesson, and then we'll have a scenario, series of explosions, smoke grenades, so forth. Some people are wounded, and everyone has to immediately apply the lessons they've learned. Um, And this, along with the sort of the cam and concealment and some others, I think it's really good to give people who are coming to view events something enjoyable for them to actually take part in as well. So you don't have to shoot. You know, I generally think that with every shooter, there's a husband, a wife, kids who sometimes get taken to these things, and I think it'd help us as a community if we made it easier for them to come and take part in, or at least make it something more enjoyable for them. I think it opens doors.
And frankly, everybody should know how to put a tourniquet on, how to do a basic wound pack, and how to put a basic compression bandage over that. It's a relatively easy skill, but it also comes into play in like car traffic accidents or someone falling down the stairs and breaking their leg or whatever. It's actually, I mean, I'm old enough that I was initially taught basic first aid in the era where tourniquets were an absolute no-no, and now they're like the first thing you do. It's been a complete reversal in the intervening 25 years, from basically, unless the leg's off, tourniquets are a no-no, to now slap one on as the first first reaction. So, but everyone should learn
Stop the bleed.
Yeah. And even if you don't carry an actual tourniquet, just having a belt or some cord or whatever, just knowing how to do it is a lifesaver. Literally.
I mean, I'm of the opinion that every chainsaw should come with a tourniquet. Those, you know, I use them a lot previously, and they are horrible machines. You know, fantastic, but they're the sort of thing that people go away into the woods with and use by themselves. And it's exactly when you need
one. Yeah, little attached to the chainsaw.
Yeah, I mean, if so long, yeah, it'll smell of petrol and whatnot, and it'll have some sawdust on it, but who cares?
Who cares?
Yeah.
It's there.
No one's picky.
No one cares. Well, it's also like no one in sort of immediate first aid. No one cares about wound infections. Like get your hand in there, because it's like stopping the bleed is more important than worrying about an infection that can be treated with antibiotics later. They're going to pump you full of intravenous antibiotics anyway if you end up in hospital having had your wound packed.
Exactly. Log race. So anyone who's been in the British Army, or probably a lot of armies, has at some point been involved in a log race of some form or another. And so that is another one I like to bring. Say 80 to 100 kilo steel tube. And this is a non-scored stage. We just do it because it's fun. And in groups of 6, 2 at a time, 600-meter loop. Put it down, rest of the firing line. There's 2 sets of targets at 1, 2. There's 2 colors, 1 for each team. First team to knock down all their targets wins. And
nice.
That gets savage. People get really into that. And again, it's just fantastic at the end of the day when everyone's blown out to do that and see who's got the grit to push for it. And yeah, absolutely massive one. So night brutality. So night shooting in Canada has very recently become significantly more tiresome to achieve. But we were able to achieve I believe it was the first of its kind night brutality event in Canada. We were able to bring a good number of people out, have targets out to 300-400 meters. And one of the key things for me again is making nighttime shooting accessible. So we did have white light divisions and made it achievable such that someone with an affordable semi-auto, a decent light with a decent candela, could come out and enjoy themselves and actually be competitive. Separated the night vision from the white light. Because of some of the equipment we had, we were able to get some really good photonic barriers up with strobe lights, mirrors, and so forth. Really push competitors to actually use their gear and to understand when to switch from night vision to white light or vice versa, and just really push those choices to be made not just once during a stage, but 2, 3 times, if that makes sense. And that was absolutely fantastic. That was the most tiresome event to run of them all, but being able to do it first was well worth it. Within Canada, of course. Obviously, you've got Midnight Brutality and Moons Out, Goons Out, and other fantastic events like those, which I'd always recommend people go to. And so, yeah, it was a lot of fun. 20,000 rounds of tracer. We enabled through a third party all of our competitors to have access to and purchase 20,000 rounds of it. Tracer, for those that don't know, in Canada is much harder to get your hands on than it might be in other places. And that's because, as best as I understand it, Global Affairs, an importation agency of the government, has effectively banned the importation of it. They've not
Ah,
legally banned it, they just don't approve any importation of it. So that was a pretty big deal for us to enable people to get hands on. And it just made the event look so much cooler. And yeah, so we're also looking to expand into Ontario. You know, had a lot of people going, please come to Ontario. It's a massive effort. It's literally crossing the continent, taking all the gear and the people and so forth with us. But that is something we're going to be digging into. And yeah, that's my little spiel about Canadian multigun and some of our events and what we've been doing differently. So happy to crack on with
right.
Sport Shoot.
Yeah. That's very interesting. I mean, I thought my first exposure to shooting in Canada was in 1999 because I was on the British Cadet Rifle team,
Yeah.
shooting target rifle, and then the sport codes that the Canadian cadets had. So I shot and sweated my backside off at Connaught Ranges near Ottawa back in the day, but that's kind of fuddly stuff compared to what you're into. So yeah, what's the TLDR of all of this?
Of the sport shooting in Canada.
Hmm.
You can see from the infrastructure, there's a lot of British Empire sort of heritage, if that makes sense, in how ranges have been and continue to be built and maintained, and a lot of the disciplines that are done. But there's also a very significant influence from American shooting culture as well. And then, of course, Canada is a huge hunting nation, and you can really see the impact of that on the sorts of things that people buy and do and so forth. And last but not least, the geography. There's 2.3 million gun owners in a country of 40 million, and the country as a whole is about the size of Europe, roughly. Probably going to get hit over the head by someone who knows the numbers, but everyone is really spread out, and that has impacted things as well. And so I'm going to read them all out, but you've got a long list of shooting sports that are popular in Canada, and a key component to Canadian shooting culture is Crown Land. So for those of you that don't know, Crown Land is effectively publicly owned land that is maintained by the government. Just the long and short of it. And so you can effectively go out into any Crown Land area in most provinces and territories where there's not a specific prohibition against it, and you can shoot your non-restricted firearm. So gravel pits and piles of rubbish are the traditional location for shooting to take place, if not at the range.
I had lots of fun doing that with Rob at British Muzzleloaders back in 2018. It's just
Yeah,
what we totally lack in Switzerland is we're only
yeah,
allowed to shoot on official ranges or private places that are sufficiently secured, which basically means like in your own cellar or something like that. Like, and then there's environmental stuff with bullets going into the ground outside. And it's just basically it's not a thing. It's on an official range or it's in your basement or other building, and that's
yeah,
it. Because it has to be sufficiently secure. Whereas you, just like in the States, you can just go. There's certain places where you guys can go and brass up the countryside,
yeah.
and you can't run. I presume you couldn't run a match on Crown Land.
I would love to, but unfortunately, organized activities on ground land are considered trespass. And
Ooh,
you also then have to start involving local agencies, First Nation partners, even if it's just on traditional, not actual land. and so
All right.
forth.
So a couple of
Then you've
mates,
got to do an
campfire.
insurance. You can do an event on private land so long as it doesn't become a regular activity. Now, I don't know what the definition of
Mm.
a regular activity is. Is once a year okay? Maybe. But again, then you've got to find someone who's willing to have 100 to 200 people turn up and shoot on their property and leave, which is interesting.
Hmm.
As with any place, the shooters are where the jobs are, and so a lot of ranges are being encroached by on by urban areas, and that is really starting to hurt a lot of clubs as people buy houses next to ranges and then get upset that ranges are noisy. Because one of the things we suffer from is that suppressors are prohibited in Canada.
That was literally what
So
I was about to ask.
yeah. So there's this really weird thing where geography is helping us and hindering us at the same time. Yeah, we're all really spread out, and then where we're focused, we've got big challenges. But because we've got so much land, we can do so much as well. So the Canadian firearm system, I'm not an expert in it. So what I'm going to do is give a high level overview of it, which is good enough for government workers, I think you might say. And,
Would indeed. I love that phrase. I
yeah,
stole that phrase from somewhere, and I love it.
yeah, yeah. And so the long and short of it is the origins of the firearm system in Canada are based on a high trust infrastructure. The rules were established on a common ground of understanding across the nation, and everyone was sort of reasonably okay with it. And it's, I'm not going to say it's collapsed, it has become enormously more complex, self contradictory, and is creating more and more issues because the people who are managing it are very low trust people and actively dislike the shooting community, at least for the last few years. And we'll go into a couple of examples of those self contradictions later. So, in order to get what you might call a firearms license, one has to conduct a firearms safety course, and it's a mandatory educational process with a knowledge test that allows a person to gain two forms of license. You have to do two courses to get both of them, one after the other. The first is a non-restricted permission to acquire license, and then after taking the second course, you get a restricted permission to acquire license. Non-restricted and restricted two categories of firearm, third being prohibited. Prohibited licenses do exist, but these are mostly grandfathered or issued to people whose equipment becomes prohibited. It's not something where you typically go out and take a safety course and then you can get it. Or businesses apply for it as part of a business license. So the actual firearm classifications, you have non-restricted, which is a type of firearm you can take out to Crown land and enjoy, or to ranges and enjoy at your leisure. So long as you are acting safely and you are in a place where it is legal to discharge or carry a firearm, all good. Just be responsible, clean up after yourself. And the definition is any firearm, the firearms with an overall length of 66 centimeters or greater, and air guns with greater than 500 feet per second speed projectile. Those are non-restricted. With semi-auto center firearms, some additional restrictions get placed on it, but the barrel length must be 470 millimeters long. So bullpups are quite popular in Canada, partly because of these overall length and barrel length restrictions. And so, this covers a lot of firearms. I'm going to give some examples, some of which are now prohibited, but just things that people commonly know. Your SKS, your VZ58, your AR-180, these are firearms which are non-restricted, as well as, of course, your plethora of bolt actions and pump actions of rifle and shotgun calibers. Going on to restricted, you have to acquire and register these firearms. Non-restricted do not need to be registered. The purchase of them is, but the actual ownership, the serial number and whatnot stays with you. Restricted wise, Authorization to transport is required in order to take the firearm to and from a place to use it. Now, within provinces, you can typically, when you're issued your RPAL, it is issued with an authorization to transport said firearm, because it's done on a firearm by firearm basis, to any range within the province. Whereas if you want to take it out of province or territory, then you start to go into requiring a more specific authorization to transport. In addition, you can't just take it anywhere with an ATT. The ATT is only enables you to take the firearm to certain places. And so then, yeah, this comes into semi-auto firearms with a barrel less than 47 centimeters, non-prohibited handguns, and if any firearm that is able to shoot when less than 66 centimeters long with the stock folded. I believe, and I need to double check, that it's more whether it's been designed to do so rather than whether or not it's physically capable of doing so. I have to double check that. And any firearm that is restricted by name. So this is the self-contradictory nature. The firearms laws within Canada define what categories of firearms are, and all firearms fall within those categories except from when they don't, because someone has taken a disliking to a specific firearm and moved it into a different category. So you will have.
Sorry, go on.
So say you'll have 3 functionally identical firearms in 3 different categories. For example, the SKS is non-restricted. An SKS with a slightly shorter barrel is restricted. A Valmet AK variant is non-restricted. A Russian AK is prohibited. All functionally within reason identical within the law. They all fall into completely different categories.
What's interesting there is that you've got just a delicious mixture of British stuff by defining with objective considerations like lengths, right? We can measure this. And you've got like American stuff like the federal assault weapons ban from 1994 and the remaining state ones where we're going to ban stuff by name because someone saw it on a movie.
Yeah, it's
it's an interesting mixture of both old
it
world
really
and new
does raise the
world.
question, is it malice or is it incompetence? And my personal belief is that it's malice being conducted by the incompetent.
I like that. I mean, I noticed I was looking because I've got a Fight Light SCR, which is on the naughty list in Canada, but under ARIS. So before Fight Light bought the design.
Oh, so here's the thing about Canadian law, and this is from the former head of the Firearms Laboratory, which is the only organization I'm aware of that can legally define a firearm. In his words, what makes a new firearm is what you write on the side. So you can have 2 identical receivers and write type A, type B. Type A can be prohibited, the other can be non-restricted. Functionally identical. We have had firearms. We have had a 22 semi-auto made prohibited because it had plastic fake AK furniture on it. You know those little bolt action Mosins, little 22s? It was kind of like that, but for an AK. And that one got made prohibited. The exact same firearm, if you change the furniture and obviously the writing on the side, non-restricted. There's no point trying to understand it. You just need to understand what you have to do.
Yeah, that's it's almost like some of the German silliness with like features that they deem to be military and non-military, and it's like I have a Nordic Components 16-inch 22 AR dedicated AR upper, but because it came through Brennell's Europe, it's German compatible, so it doesn't have M-LOK slots on the side. It's got these like ghosts of M-LOK slots because in Germany it's got a case length under 40 millimeters because it's a 22, and And if it had slots on the side, that would be like a perforated barrel jacket, like a machine gun or something. Yeah, it's very, very silly.
I think living and shooting in several countries has taught me that the only consistent thing amongst firearms laws is how utterly inconsistent they are.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely. And I'm lucky that I live in Switzerland, where they tend not to worry about this kind of thing, mostly. But anyway, sorry, back at the plot.
That's all right. Yeah, long and short of gun ownership in many countries is just the Harold Payne meme. So onward to prohibited. Um, you used to be able to take your prohibited firearms out to the range. No longer. You basically you can deactivate it, surrender it, sell it to the US or a business, or just look at it in your gun cabinet, and think wistfully about how you could, because you live in the middle of the woods and no one would ever hear anything shoot it. But obviously that would be naughty. Yeah. So what falls under the list here is, automatics, firearms of a caliber greater than 20 millimeters, which instantly caused issues with shotguns. And our, at the time, head of, I've forgotten his specific organization, but the bloke in charge of doing all these bans decided to reassure everyone that no 10 gauge shotguns and so forth were not banned by sending a tweet and then ignoring it, even though the definition continued to functionally ban these firearms. Calibers with the capability to have greater than 10,000 joules of energy at the muzzle got killed, so 50 cals disappeared, and some other calibers did too. There's some gray as to what capable means. Is it capable by design of the caliber, or if I take my 12 gauge shotgun and stuff enough in it, it'll do it? It won't do it many times, but it'll do it. So what does that actually mean? No one's really tested that yet, to the best of my knowledge. 25 and 32 cal handguns. This is the Saturday night specials sort of thing that came out of the US.
Okay, so
I
hang
don't.
on. How do the ISSF centerfire handgun guys cope? Is there some exemption for 32 Smith & Wesson long wad cutter, or was it just screw you guys, you've got to find old Hammerleys and shoot 38?
So I need to double check. Again, this is why I say it's high level. I believe it's 25 and 32 ACP,
Okay.
not diameter. Apologies, I should have been more clear.
Okay.
And I believe, though, that there is a specific exemption, but it gets into the weeds so much that for 99.9% of us, what I wrote there is accurate.
Okay. Let's not get in the weeds.
With ACP added.
Yeah. Okay.
Firearms prohibited by name because reasons. Yeah, that's why your AK is naughty, but your Valmet AK is okay. Firearms adapted to be shorter than the given measurements there in total length, barrel length. So if you were to take your rifle to a machine smith and they were to cut it to length, that would make that firearm prohibited instead of restricted. Whereas if you were to buy a barrel from a manufacturer to the same length and put it in your gun, then it would merely be restricted. Because I'm guessing they were thinking about people who were using an angle grinder to cut down their shotgun barrel and hide it under a jacket. I'm not really sure when that person was going to read this law, but so be it. And handguns with barrels shorter than 10.5 centimeters. Again, not sure when that was ever actually an issue. We can have things like Glock 48s, pretty concealable. It's as is. And the last one is a more recent one. A firearm that is not a handgun discharges centerfire ammo in semi-auto manner. Long story short, any semi-auto rifle caliber firearm that was designed after December 15th and then made after that point is prohibited. This came off the back of an attempt to ban an enormous amount of additional firearms. It went tits up, and they stuck this in there as if it somehow achieved something.
It's designed
I don't know.
and manufactured.
So if you can say, I designed this on before December 15th, 2023, you good. If it's been designed after December 15th, 2023, tough. If it can take a magazine with a capacity of 6 cartridges or more, because
I
rifles in
designed
Canada can only use 5 round
five.
mag.
Yeah.
It's a mess.
Uh,
It's,
anyway.
again, just pain. Here's a helpful little guide created by someone on Reddit. And I'm not going to go through each of these, but you get the feeling there that just from the top row, for example, there's a difference of 0.6 of an inch between 3 identical firearms, and it takes them through 3 separate categories. It's nuts. It's just absolutely nuts. But yeah, the WK-180C you can see in the middle row on the left there, or the Armalite AR-180, non-restricted, whereas a different type of Armalite AR-180 specifically banned by name. So again, literally functionally identical.
Oh, hang on. The polymer lower Armalite AR-180B is non-restricted, but the
Yes.
OG steel lower version is prohibited.
Yes.
Okay.
Galaxy brain material.
Oh, that is
Absolutely
absolutely Galaxy brain. Oh my lord.
Magazine fed M1 Garand, non-restricted. M14, prohibited.
What
Yeah,
would be cool to put in there is the Chinesium M14s being non-restricted and the Springfield
prohibited.
M1A being prohibited.
Yeah, so the Springfield M1A was non-restricted until a massive ban in 2020, which moved it and the Norinkos into
Oh,
prohibited.
sorry, I'm out of date. It was 2018 when I was there.
Yeah,
Ah,
yeah. Luger banned. Luger with shoulder thingy and 32 round drum mag legal.
huh.
Yeah, it's
Oh,
yeah,
and hang on, you're the opposite
Galaxy.
way around to the US with the VZ61
Mm,
because
it's
with the stock, it's an NFA item,
yeah.
Form 4 and a $200 tax stamp. Well, it's not, so I guess would be their equivalent of restricted. Whereas the pistol version without the shoulder thing that goes up is the US equivalent of non-restricted. It's Title 1, but you've got it the other way around. Oof, that's fun.
Inconsistency and the uh, the airsoft gun being restricted is quite fun as well.
Oh yeah, that's fun.
So yeah, thanks to Sonoda Katori on Reddit, I borrowed this as it did explain things quite well. So
Yeah, that's fun.
appreciate it. So some more fun, shall we say, that we've encountered. In 2020, we had a awful gentleman who imported some firearms legally from the US, crossed the border in his truck, and no one looked in it. So he just drove in from one country to another, did some terrible things, and as a result, the Canadian government decided to ban 1,500 different types of rifle and shotgun, including Swiss-made anti-tank missiles, German mortars, and various other exciting things, which obviously were all on the shelves at the time. Yeah, Galaxy Brain again. Mm. And they did this via an order in council, which the established process was more that an order in council is supposed to be you've written a law, it's gone through parliament and so forth, and then you find you need to tweak a few words. So you don't want to go through the whole process. It's in no one's interest. So you go back, you update it, job done. They used that in order to just completely bypass the
The
democratic
democratic
process for
process, yeah.
yeah, and banned everything. Now, so things like the VZ58, which was non-restricted, AR-15 restricted, and a whole plethora of other firearms got made prohibited. except that they remained in the same category that they were in previously for purposes of storage. So they basically turned around and said, these things are so dangerous, you cannot possibly do anything but continue to store them as you have done previously. And it's been 4 years since that took place. They were supposed to gather everything within 2 years. We've had 2 extensions now, and these things that so urgently need to be taken off the streets, so to speak, remained in the same people's hands for 4 years with no issues whatsoever. However, that ban did, in part, spur and energize the Canadian semi-auto industry, which we'll come on to.
Streisand effect. Well, it's the
Yeah.
1994 US assault weapon ban effect.
Boom. I
It's
guess
like
that's the closest comparison I'm aware of.
it's like just
Uh,
just as a little aside for those who don't
yeah.
know, it's like the scary black rifles were a super niche thing until the Streisand effect of the 1994 assault weapon ban came into effect, and that just completely boosted the market for the grandfathered in pre-bans and for the then banned versions where they just took the naughty scary features, some of the naughty scary features off, like bayonet lugs and threaded muzzles, and then it's just that's what kicked off the massive AR-15 industry in the US, from being a niche thing with like Colt and Bushmaster and Olympic Arms, feeding very, very specific niches to, oh, they want to ban it, therefore I need it, and then it just exploding. But
it's had an impact in Canada for sure. And the other factor that's had an impact is the fact that so many firearms were banned by name previously. It gave the industry as time to start. If they'd never started doing that, and if the US had always been providing $500 AKs, $750 AR-15s, it would never have come into existence at the same scale, certainly. And it has completely shaped the industry as it is today. As has in part the handgun freeze. So in 2022, off the back of basically there was another political incident with the existing government, and they decided to do the usual distraction technique, and a handgun freeze was brought in, which effectively banned anyone under the age of 18 from ever having a handgun, and anyone who already had a handgun after a certain date would no longer be able to transfer that firearm. So if grandpa dies, his handguns get destroyed, or more realistically, disappeared by him.
boating accident.
Yeah, exactly. I suspect a lot of grandparents who don't want to see their stuff go into a smelter are going to make the personal choice to hide those things. And they didn't set a date on when the ban was going to take place. And so people responded predictably. And I think I read that 3 years worth of handgun sales took place in the space of a month. I think hands down, they hands down by themselves managed to create more handgun owners in one action than they could have done by any other means. It does suck because obviously, you've got people with 20 gun handguns, others with one handgun, and I think it's fair to say that handguns, unlike rifles, are harder to adapt to people's individual hands and personal ergonomics. But it took place, and that's had a really negative impact because it's much harder to bring people into dynamic shooting. And also, obviously, a handgun range is something you can set up in a city. It's 25 meters, it's more affordable ammo. Guns are typically not excessively priced. So, it's how you keep urban people coming into shooting. That, just as with Dunblane, has had a significant impact that we are seeing continually. We very much hope that that gets repealed next year or the year after. But as a result, organizations like mine, we are bringing in rifle-only divisions to keep people coming into dynamic shooting and keep people involved. And pistol caliber carbine has also increased in popularity significantly. In addition to the handgun freeze, they also tried a mega amendment where they tried to ban just about everything on the face of the earth, including 1908 Brazilian Mausers, and literally they just that one category was just Mauser, and I don't think they realized it. Had that amendment passed, they would have just banned every single Mauser action in the country, which is not a small quantity. Uh,
No.
yeah, that was effectively a bridge too far. It really unraveled things, and it got back in this box and reduced in size enormously. And I won't say that was the end of things under the current administration, but what that's been the most recent significant surge to try and ban things that we've had from memory. The firearms reference table, it's not so much a recent legal event, more of as an ongoing challenge. This is a list of guns, and it is created by the Firearms Laboratory in Canada and maintained by them. It's an RCMP, federal police organization, and it is not a legal document, according to the creator of it. And the maintainers of it insist that it is not a legal document, it is merely a reference document. It's just the document police will use to determine what category your firearm is, whether or not they take you to jail in handcuffs, confiscate your property, and then push you through an enormous legal process that can destroy your life. So it's not a legal document, not at all. It's just, something used by law enforcement, not that we're better about. And it is something that is required. You are required if you are importing a firearm into Canada to have a reference in the firearms reference table for that firearm, which categorizes it as a non-restricted, restricted, or prohibited firearm. You are not required that if you build the firearm in Canada. So if you make a semi-auto in New York or Ontario, one is banned, one is allowed to be produced without any checks and considered non-restricted if it meets the definitions previously provided.
That's a very US American thing.
Yeah, it's kind of like their parts. Is it 92R or whatever? 922R?
922R.
Yeah,
the sport, and also the sporting purposes thing for
yeah,
import, which only affects imported firearms. It doesn't affect the US made firearms.
yeah. And the creator of this list has admitted in court, in writing, to having based some of his judgments based on magazines he was reading and the marketing used. So, hooray.
Fun.
This is increasingly, we are seeing examples of RCMP overreach, and one organization, Alberta Tactical Rifles, something, ATRS, they produced a firearm. They, even though they didn't need to, got a place for it on the FRT, marking it as non-restricted. The 2020 Ordering Council came in. They were not named on it. And then shortly after, the RCMP decided it was prohibited and changed its status within the firearms reference table. So even though this is allegedly very capable laboratory full of experts, don't you know, those opinions and what can be changed on the flip of a coin. That is just an enormous challenge for any stability. And RCMP opinions continue to be an issue. Uh, it's, I fill this video with issues. I will move on. So going on to Canadian-made, non-restricted semi-autos. I'm not going to capture every single individual one, but the long and short of it is, the list there that you see of the significant manufacturers of in production non-restricted firearms. Others produce lowers only, so forth. So Kodak Defense is probably one of the larger, and they kicked this off with Wolverine Supplies. in 2018. The idea being to have $1,000 non-restricted semi-auto that gave you a lot of the capabilities of an AR-15, which at the time sat in the restricted class. And they produced the brick that is a Gen 1 WK-180. And throughout time, it has evolved through generation 1, 2, and 3. I've used some red dots on the receiver of the generation 2 there to highlight some areas of change. So they've gone from reciprocating cocking handle, they've changed the angle of the magwell, they've gone to an AR-15 selector, and so on and so forth. And where the hand goes, they've actually rounded it off now, so it's not like you've just got a metal brick on the top of your hand when you're shooting the thing, which is very nice. I won't go into details again because it could be a different video, but Kodiak and other manufacturers went through a plethora of quality control, design, materials, and so forth issues.
It sounds like everybody in Canada did for some reason.
Yeah, I think the AR-18, to the best of my understanding, was designed to be produced using stamping machinery, steel, aluminium, I think maybe aluminium as well, in massive numbers. And they took that design, tried to make it as cheap as possible, and make it in small numbers using a different manufacturing process.
Yeah, well, originally it's an all stamped design. Like even the hammer is stamped in the original. Like,
yeah,
there's almost no machine parts outside of the barrel on the barrel. Well, so in the receivers, other than the barrel extension, there's very few. Like almost the entire, if not the entire, fire control group is stamped. And that's even one of the patent claims in the US. In the USA, AR-18 patent is that it's everything in the fire control group is stamped, because fundamentally there's nothing really in the design that was patentable. It's a combination of lots of things that were already known. So you just got to stack claims until you get enough. Sorry, I'm going off on day job stuff. Carry
on. Here, the aim was to use as many AR-15 parts as possible, because in Canada, the lower receiver, sometimes the upper receiver, depends on where parts fall, is the firearm itself. So the idea was to take advantage of the US market for affordability of parts, and then do as few unique parts as possible to keep price down.
Absolutely makes sense.
Going on to Gen 3, you can see going from Gen 1 to left-hand side to Gen 3, it has just evolved enormously. Yeah, you've got the folding stocks there, you've got a completely different gas system. The Picatinny rail is now in spec, dust covers there. You now have 2 retaining pins instead of 1. Handguard has changed. Dust cover is now in place, so on and so forth. Again, I'll save it for another video or time, but enormous growth there. So that's one of the more affordable options. It started off around about $1,000, and the most recently announced Gen 3, I believe, is retailing for about 1,800 Canadian dollars without tax. And partly because Kodiak Defense has the ability to make these in large numbers, which in part is part of the success. Not everyone has been able to produce things in sufficient quantities to have them on your local Brownells shelves. One last final one, the WK-181 Gen 2. This was a bit of a weird one. They actually did change the gas system, which had a huge number of issues in the 180 series up until the Gen 3, fingers crossed. But they didn't implement it in the 180. I don't know why. I presume they were working on the Gen 3 and didn't see the point in having an intermediary system. But the long and short of this one was use AK mags, take advantage of that sweet, cheap surplus Chinese ammo. That's what we did. Around 10,000 rounds through one of these for a test, and compared to other things on the market at the time, it was different, for sure. Spectre Limited. You may see some resemblance between what they made and the WK-180. That is in part because there was a separation of the 2 companies that made the WK-180. Spectre Limited and Wolverine Supplies produced the Wolverine Supplies multi-caliber rifle. And you can see the Gen 1 and 2 there. See the sort of more ergonomic changes that took place between the two generations.
Hmm.
All his rifles can achieve about 2 MOA with standard ammunition, your American Eagle 55 grain full metal jacket. Again, non-restricted. And, I'd say these were probably a little bit better made than the WK-180s and a little more reliable parts-wise. Um, they got to have a second go at it, basically. But you don't see so many of these being sold as the Cody defense firearms. They're just not as prevalent. And then the owner, who of Spectre Limited, decided to make Crusader Arms Limited and produce the absolute tank heavyweight rifle that is the Templar Generation 1 and 2. I only have pictures of the Generation 2, I think. Had the HK slap cocking handle. I can say I wanted it, but yeah, it's a very heavy rifle. Very heavy. And again, you can just looking at it, you can see it's just a continuation of the 180 Lifeline.
It's a bit scarish.
Yeah, and got a boot. Unfortunately, allegedly, those were airsoft stocks. They had some issues with them.
Hmm.
I don't know if things improved, but wasn't a good start. And you've got the totally not an AR-15 crypto. The crypto is an upper and lower receiver, which are marginally different than an AR-15 lower and upper receiver. And then every single other part in it is an AR-15. And I'm all for saying fuck you to the regulations by fitting within them. But in a country where a firearm can be banned by name like that, I think community as a whole is just waiting for that to get banned. Um, More power to the people that buy them and enjoy them, but it's yeah. And then the Crux 308, which again, it's the same as a Templar, but they made it bigger and added a third recoil spring to account for the differences. And that went about as well as you'd expect it to,
Mhm.
with parts traveling in multiple directions in some cases. Black Creek Laboratories, they made the Siberian. Again, the internals of this rifle are AR-180. If you look at the internals of the WK-180, they are damn near identical. And it happens
What
to be that they actually
I
made them.
I had a
They
Siberian
made,
apart, and I was
yeah,
very surprised to see that it is Leader T2 derived. It's got an entirely captive working parts system.
yeah,
That I was not expecting. I was expecting it to come apart more like a normal 180, and I pull it out and I go, "Ooh, I know
yeah.
what you did
No,
there."
I like it. I'm glad they've got it. That's one of the things I like about it. I personally conducted a test with a group of others. We put 4K through the Siberian. It had to go back for warranty on 3 occasions. It had just numerous issues. You couldn't rest on the magwell without causing a stoppage. The handguard had no ventilation in the top half, which created joyful amounts of heat. The side cocking bolt release would jam all the time and fail, and just so on and so forth. Fingers crossed they've improved it, but I wouldn't touch that one with a 20-meter barge pole, especially not seeing as they've taken the firearm and just made it bigger for 308. So
Mm.
hence the Grizzly. It's literally the same thing but big. Uh, and again, 180. Sterling Arms International, to the best of my knowledge, not related to the British company Ackle. It just is happens to have is choosing to use a similar name. They produced the R18 Mark II, which again, AR-180. Absolute tank of a rifle in performance, weight. This was one of the ones. It was much higher priced. Uh, they've just stopped producing this in order to move to the R18 Mark III, which is very similar to a Turkish rifle. I think it's called the Arkan or some such thing.
Hmm.
And I think a lot of the parts are actually being made in Turkey, and it has a separate firearms reference table number. Um,
Mm.
Yeah, so we'll see. I'm hoping that it comes through well.
Is that just looking at it? Is that piston or is it stoner
It's
type
piston.
DI? Okay,
These are all short stroke
they're
piston,
all piston. Okay,
except from the crypto, which is
the
obviously
one that's a
DI.
non-compatible. That's a non-compatible AR-15.
Yeah. Speaking of which, Lockhart Tactical, who went through the laborious effort of, and again, someone's going to shout at me for this. This is my ignorant, dumb man point of view. Taking an AR-15 and changing the measurements on a bunch of parts, and then it's a new rifle, put it together, and there you go. It's now non-restricted. I think this one has actually got a firearms reference table reference as non-restricted. Not that that helped ATRS or Maccabee Defense in the past, but this one's selling well, and people are actually pretty happy with it. So that's a good thing to see. Yeah, that is the broad spread of the current non-restricted options in Canada, made in Canada. There's a lot of other things you can import, but that's what we have at the moment. It's
Wow.
basically, again, ignorant point of view here. AR-180 variants and not AR-15s.
Yeah.
I'm sure. Yeah.
Presumably the Norinco non-compatible AR-15s are on the naughty list.
Oh yeah. Yeah. I'm sure someone's going to try and import some, but the Firearms laboratory typically takes their time giving a definition as to what something is, especially for importation purposes. So
because there's some of them
maybe in
kicking
2 years.
around. There's some of them kicking around here still from back in the day, still
Okay.
unsold, and they're cheap as not very much. And it's like it might just be interesting to expend some channel budget on getting one just so that I can look at it really and show it. And it's like, here's this thing, and let's look at what's actually the same and what's different to an actual compatible AR-15. And but yeah, that's a project for another day. So thank you very much for that exceedingly interesting presentation. I didn't realize it had been an hour and 12. It's only, in fact, only my bladder has been telling me that it's that long.
I do apologize for
No.
wittering on and on, but there's no other way to say it than to say it.
Oh,
But it is exceedingly broad subject.
absolutely, absolutely. And I think it's very interesting looking at it because there's a lot of Fudlore about guns in Canada and shooting in Canada and so on. Uh, and people don't really understand it one way or another. So it's interesting to have it all out there, and very interesting on the Canadian built stuff because I've been talking to Black Creek, and I've had that Siberian um, in my hands, and it was current production one, and I mean the build quality looked good, but you never know what the materials are underneath it.
It was fitted. The one I used it fitted well, it looked nice, and then you run a bunch of different mags through it and run several hundred rounds through it, not constantly, but just over time, and it just up again and again and again. And things like having to take the gas block off to clean the gas system is pain. Uh,
Hmm.
you, you absolutely should not have to do that.
No.
Um, and just Handgun design. They took the time to make all those little indentations along it to make it look cool, which is nice and all, but my hands don't like melting. So, yeah, and they produced some of the parts for the WK-180 originally. So I was kind of quite upset with them because they watched this market for several years and they had the time to get it right first time, and then they didn't. I do
Mm,
hope I hope it's now perfectly functional and I'm out of date, but
yeah.
let it go off what I did.
Mm. Anyway, thank you so much for appearing on the channel. I think we shall cut it off here. I thank you for your offer to come back and do some proper down the rabbit hole deep dives on some of this stuff. So for those who have survived so far, thank you all so much. I might just release the audio on this separately as a podcast. I might just stick it on my Google Drive and link it in the description below. I'll certainly put it up on Patreon. And yeah, thanks to all our supporters who keep the channel ticking along. And go support Tom at Canadian Multigun. Or what are your social medias? Infospam.
canadianmultigun.ca. Go on Instagram, just search Canadian Multigun. We're there. We're on Facebook and Reddit as well under our Canada Guns. You can email us at canadianmultigun@gmail.com. Next event is Winter Brutality, March 1st and 2nd. Same event, 2 days, just to help more people come at Joe Rich Sportsman's Association near Kelowna, British Columbia. So come along.
Right. Do you have Patreon or other ways for people to shovel cash in your direction?
I don't do Patreon for my events. I do also run separately Canadian Firearms Endurance Testing, which is an organization I set up specifically to test Canadian-made firearms because of how badly things were going. And there is that for that, but not for my Canadian multigun side of things.
All right. We'll link all of this in the description. We'll sort this out later and link it all in the description. Yeah. All right. Thank you so much to our supporters, as I said, and see you again sometime. Bye.